Order. It being 2 p.m. Questions without notice. Senator Watt.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Emergency Management, Senator Ruston. Can the Minister confirm that the Morrison government has spent $500 million less on bushfire recovery than it has announced and has failed to spend a single cent from its $4 billion Emergency Response Fund on resilience or mitigation works? Why is the Morrison government failing to deliver to help Australians recover and prepare for bushfires?
The Minister representing the Minister for Emergency Management, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you very much, Senator, for your question. What I can confirm, Senator, is that every person that has been impacted by bushfires, all bushfire-affected communities, that we absolutely are committed but standing by them to support them in their recovery. In reference to the numbers that you have just put on the table in relation to the Bushfire Recovery Fund and the funding that is made available on an annual basis to support bushfire mitigation into the future, is a fund that is put in place, and it has a very specific purpose, and it also has some very specific conditions around it, Senator. And one of those conditions is that all other sources of funding to support bushfire recovery have been expended before that particular fund comes into effect, and the $200 million annually that is made available as a dividend from that fund to support our recovery and our mitigation activities going into the future. As you would be well aware, that we have spent more than $1.8 billion in support of our bushfire recovery. $1.2 billion, if you'd like me, I'm quite happy to go through and to table in relation to the areas in which that $1.2 billion has been spent. But you conflate a number of issues, Senator. You conflate there is a significant difference between the bushfire recovery expenditure that has already occurred to date through a myriad of different programs that have been administered across many, many portfolios in government, and the fund that you refer to, which refers to the money that is put aside to assist Australia in putting in place mitigation factors into the future, which, as I said, Senator, it requires all other forms of funding to have been expended before that one is activated.
Senator Watt, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. In Bega and Cobargo, towns devastated by the last bushfire season, community organisations are still crowdfunding to upgrade toilet blocks and build evacuation centres in preparation for this bushfire season. Why are communities being forced to crowdfund for toilet blocks and evacuation centres while the Morrison government's $4 billion Emergency Response Fund sits untouched?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. But as I have said to the senator on numerous occasions, there has been a huge range of programs put in place to assist our bushfire-affected communities, including the communities in which Senator refers. And if you'd like me to, I'm quite happy to go through a number of programs. For instance, the support that's been provided, to small businesses in these communities. But the fund to which you refer, Senator, is a specific fund with a specific purpose, with a specific set of criteria. And Senator, the funding that once all other funding has been exhausted, that fund will come into effect, and that fund is in place into the future to make sure that we are always in the place year after year after year to be able to put funding in place to assist these communities to prepare for next year. The funding which is currently being expended is the Bushfire Response and Recovery Fund from 2020.
Senator Watt, final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. The Prime Minister says he doesn't hold a hose, but he does hold the taxpayer's chequebook. Why hasn't he delivered the funding he announced?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, Senator, I reject the premise of your question because I believe the Prime Minister has not only has been a very strong Prime Minister in making sure that funding has immediately been made available to many communities across Australia, and that funding is out the door, as I have already said. The total spend on the bushfire recovery has been $1.8 billion, and this includes the National Bushfire Recovery Fund and existing support mechanisms. So, Senator, you conflate two different funding pools. you know you're conflating two different funding pools because they have two different purposes. The bushfire recovery funds that have been made available to our communities that have been so devastatingly impacted by bushfires have been expended in our communities. The fund to which you refer to has a completely different purpose.
Senator McGrath.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Can the Minister inform the Senate how the Morrison Liberal National Government's strong budget measures and economic leadership is ensuring our comeback from the COVID-19 recession?
Order. The Minister representing. Can we at least let the Minister commence his answer before we get disorderly interjections? The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator McGrath for his question. Mr President, the Australian economy is proving to be remarkably resilient as it strengthens and comes back from the COVID-19-induced recession. Today, the national accounts for the September quarter show that the recovery of the Australian economy is well underway. The Australian economy grew by 3.3% for the September quarter, the strongest quarterly growth rate since 1976 and ahead of market expectations of 2.5%. It follows, of course, the COVID-19-induced 7% fall in the June quarter. Technically, the COVID-19 recession may, in a technical sense, be over, but our recovery continues and the government knows that there is significant hard work ahead. We know that many Australian households and businesses continue to do it very tough. But pleasingly, the national accounts saw strong growth in every state except Victoria for the September quarter. Our growth is being driven by household consumption, which grew by 7.9% for the quarter, the largest increase on record. It contributed some 4% to real GDP growth for the quarter. Consumption was up across 17 categories, with the largest contributors being health, hotels, cafes and restaurants, many sectors where small businesses and employees have been doing it tough, and we welcome very much the fact that they are coming back strongly in terms of their recovery. Our government's goal has been to make sure that Australians are safe from the virus and to keep Australians in their jobs and to help them to find a job through these tough times. We have been succeeding in these goals. Over the last 5 months, 650,000 jobs have been created, with the effective unemployment rate down from a peak of 14.9% to 7.4%. The Morrison government strongly contributed to this recovery with $257 billion in direct economic support and continues to invest.
Expired. Senator McGrath, a supplementary question.
Thank you. Can the Minister advise how our economic comeback has been upgraded by the latest report from the OECD?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, the OECD has released its latest Economic Outlook report, and that report has upgraded Australia's economic growth outlook.
Order.
The OECD notes that the COVID-19 pandemic continues to exert a substantial toll on economies and societies, with global GDP expected to contract by 4.2% in 2020 and indeed across other advanced economies an average fall of 5.5%. However, in Australia, the OECD has improved their forecast for Australia. Previously, they had forecast a 4.1% contraction. They now expect that to be 3.8%. This, of course, is well above and better than the forecast for those other advanced economies. It's proof yet again that Australia's successful management of the health crisis and the economic crisis is delivering improved and better results for Australians compared with the rest of this world facing a global
Senator
pandemic.
Birmingham. Senator McGrath, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. Can the Minister outline any other economic news that shows how the government is building a stronger and more secure post-pandemic Australia and ensuring our comeback?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, thanks, Senator McGrath and Mr President. Well, yes, indeed, leading up to today's GDP data, we've seen a range of different data points that show the recovery is well and truly underway. Unlike those opposite who seem to think that this is all just a political game that they can heckle and jekyll about, ultimately these are serious issues that deal with the lives, jobs and businesses of Australians. We're pleased to see consumer confidence is up 2.9%. Indeed, it's increased for 12 of the past 13 weeks. Payroll jobs data was up again this week. This is the third consecutive fortnight in which we have seen positive payroll jobs data. Building approvals rose by 3.8% in October to be 14.3% higher through the year. These measures are all about ensuring better job security for Australians, better prospects for Australian businesses and the recovery of Australia's economy from this global pandemic.
Or Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Yesterday, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Dr Lowe, confirmed that unemployment in Australia will remain high for at least the next 2 years, saying, and I quote, "A further rise in the unemployment rate is still expected. The unemployment rate is forecast to decline next year, but only slowly, and still to be around 6% at the end of 2022. Why is the government congratulating itself on the economy when there are 2.4 million unemployed or underemployed Australians and the jobless queues are still growing?"
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Thanks, Senator Gallagher, for your question. The Governor of the Reserve Bank had some things to say today as well. He did. To quote him, he said, "We have now turned the corner and the recovery is underway." No, it does, Senator. It does, and it's offensive that you would suggest otherwise. It matters a great deal, and indeed, in my first answer, just given to the previous question, I was very clear in acknowledging that there are Australian businesses and households who are still doing it tough. We know that. This is a global pandemic that Australia has faced, and we've faced it better than the rest of the world, and we've faced it as a nation. We don't take full credit as a government by any means. We know this has been a partnership with hard-working Australians, a partnership with Australians in business who have come through this tough times, a partnership with the states and territories in terms of their responses. At every step of the way, we have sought to work with Australians to get the results that have kept Australians in a much better place. Now, I don't know whether those opposite would rather be in any other country of the world right now, but I tell you what, most Australians know they would rather be here, because in Australia they are safer than they would be in virtually any other country in the world. And in Australia, their jobs and their businesses and their livelihoods are safer than in virtually any other advanced economy around the world. That is the result of the type of policies that have been deployed across Australia, but it doesn't mean that the crisis is over. Far from that. We know very well there are more Australians to get back to work. There are more Australian businesses still doing it tough. That's why the budget we handed down this year, our economic recovery plan, focuses on job creation, investment driving, the things that will help the recovery continue.
Senator Gallagher, a supplementary question.
The Reserve Bank Governor also said, and I quote, "In the September quarter, the wage price index increased by just 0.1% to be 1.4% higher over the year." Dr Lowe went on to say that wages growth would continue to be subdued going forward. Why is the government congratulating itself on the economy when workers and families have suffered with stagnant wages and will continue to under this government?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, order. The government is absolutely focused on getting Australians back into work and creating strength in the employment market yet again. When we went to the last election, one of the key achievements that we took to that election was the creation across the Australian economy of more than 1.5 million jobs during the work of our first 6 years in government. And it absolutely devastates us, as we know it does many parts of Australia, at the fact that this pandemic has created chaos in many of those jobs and, of course, the households who depend upon them. But what we do welcome is the fact that we've seen 650,000 jobs come back, recreated, over the course of the last 5 months. This is about making sure that we do get Australians back into work, and that in getting them back into the work we recreate strength in the labour market, and through that across the wages market
Senator
too.
Birmingham. Senator Gallagher, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. Minister, 3 million Australians are currently relying on JobKeeper and JobSeeker to get by. 2.4 million people are out of work or not getting enough hours. 337,000 young people are on the unemployment queues, with more to join them by Christmas. Why is the government congratulating itself on the economy when widespread economic pain is being felt by millions of Australians who are being left behind by the Morrison government?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, let me again deal with this attempt by the opposition to run some sort of congratulatory theme. The only congratulations I offer are to hard-working Australian businesses and their employees who have come through these tough times. They're the ones that we congratulate for the fact that they have absolutely responded to this crisis with support from the government. No doubt with support from the government. You cited some of those supports, Senator. You cited them in terms of JobKeeper, the single largest intervention in an Australian economy ever. We created it, our government has extended it. We created it and we extended it, but in this year's budget we also outlined the next steps in terms of the economic recovery, outlining the fact that driving private sector investment is about job creation for the long term, sustainable jobs for the long term, getting the investment that absolutely generates business growth for jobs growth
Senator
to keep
Birmingham,
it going.
Time for the answers expired. Senator Chandler.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is for the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash. Can the minister update the Senate on how the latest ABS labour force figures for October show the underlying resilience of the Australian economy and how the Morrison government's economic leadership through the COVID-19 pandemic has supported jobs and our economic comeback?
Order. The Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President. And I thank Senator Chandler for her question. And, Mr President, when the Treasurer earlier today was updating the Australian public on the national accounts, this is what he actually said. The road ahead will be long, it will be hard and it will be bumpy. But the Australian economy has demonstrated—
Sorry, Senator Cash, could I ask you to move to the next microphone, and I'll ask the broadcasting to move to the next speak into the next microphone at the vacant seat. If broadcasting can turn that on. There was some static from yours. Sorry.
Maybe no mic at all.
If
I know.
I'm having trouble hearing the minister, so I'm not going to ask them to turn it down due to disorderly interjections. Please continue, Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, as I was saying, the Treasurer said that the Australian economy has demonstrated remarkable resilience, and it actually has. Because what today's accounts show is that the Morrison government's economic plan is helping to create jobs, it is helping to boost our economic recovery, and it is helping to secure Australia's future. And as the Leader of the government said, we have now seen GDP growth in the third quarter return to positive territory, growing by 3.3%. And, Mr President, this is reinforced by the latest labour force figures for October, which do show that with the further easing of restrictions across Australia, businesses being able to reopen their doors, jobs are returning to the economy. And in fact, the labour force figures for October, they show that labour market conditions across Australia do continue to recover, with employment increasing in October by 178,800 over the month. And indeed, Mr President, when you look at what the market expectations were versus what the employment growth actually was, 178,800, it far exceeded market expectations. And when you look at the breakdown of those jobs, full-time employment increased by 97,000. This is the largest monthly increase on record, and part-time employment rose by 81,800. We also saw an almost 1% increase in the participation rate. So Australians are putting up their hands and they are saying we want to go back to work. But, Mr President, this doesn't happen by accident. This happens because of the strong policies that the Morrison government is putting in place.
Expired. Senator Chandler, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister inform the Senate how the October results build on the jobs recovery we've seen in recent months and how many Australians have found work again since the pandemic began?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, again, as we recognise, as the Prime Minister recognises, as the Treasurer recognises, there remains a long road to recovery. But what Australians also want to know is that we are on the right track. They want to know that the policies that we are as a government putting in place to support them and to support their employer in keeping their jobs open are actually working, and they are. In fact, Mr President, more than 75% of those who lost their jobs have returned to work. That is actually a good thing for those people. 75% who lost their jobs are back at work. And when you look at the last 5 months, around 648,500 jobs have returned to the labour market since employment fell to its lowest level in May. And pleasingly, as Senator Payne knows, almost 343,800 jobs were actually for women. Australians actually want to be given hope, and certainly the employment figures do just that.
Has expired. Senator Chandler, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the coalition government had put in place the economic policies to support the creation of 1.5 million jobs. How will the government continue to support the recovery of the labour market and build on this record of supporting job creation?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, the resilience of the labour market is actually on show with the employment figures, and in particular over the last 5 months. But that is because Australia entered COVID-19 from a position of economic strength. That is actually a good thing. You want to enter a pandemic from a position of economic strength, because what it means is you have a chance of surviving it, and that is exactly what we are seeing happening. As we know on the government side of a chamber, governments don't create jobs. Employers do. Businesses do. Our role as a government is to put in place the economic policies that will help businesses keep their doors open, prosper, grow and create more jobs for Australians. And that is exactly what we're doing. And that's why we have our Job Maker plan. It builds on our strong economic record, empowering businesses to prosper, grow and create more jobs for Australians, which is what we want them to do.
Senator Griff.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to Senator Cash, representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development. Minister, given the government is underwriting key domestic routes through the Domestic Aviation Network Support Program, or DANS, and that state borders are reopening, what discussions or agreement has government reached with the major airlines about the prospect of returning flights to normal by Christmas?
The Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development, Senator Cash.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And I thank Senator Griff for the question. Senator Griff, my understanding is, or I've been advised, the government is actually having, as you know, ongoing discussions with the nation's domestic airlines throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and we will continue to do that. Because, as you know, the aviation sector it has been severely impacted by COVID-19. Both domestic flights and international flights are down significantly, and unfortunately thousands of workers in the sector have been stood down. You'd also be aware, though, that in terms of the support that we've provided to date, it's around $2.7 billion so far to support the aviation sector. This includes support to maintain minimum air services across Australia, including over 400 return flights per week to more than 120 locations, of which more than 110 are regional or remote. $120 million has been paid to airlines to support critical connections on Australia's major routes, and over $30 million has been paid to airlines to ensure essential regional air networks can be maintained. As you know, though, the reality is international borders are still closed, and as such the Australian government wants domestic travel to get back to normal as soon as possible. The recent challenge we've faced, though, has obviously been in relation to state and territories at some time having their borders closed, and sometimes at very short notice. But encouragingly, both Queensland and indeed my home state of Western Australia have recently announced the opening of their borders to Victoria and New South Wales. And what we are now seeing as a direct response to that is increase or strong demand for flights returning already. But what we will do is continue to talk
Senator Cash.
with the aviation
sector. Time for the answers expired. Senator Griff, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, a number of my constituents and other constituents have experienced extraordinarily high fares in recent times. And an example I can give yesterday were a flight to Adelaide. A number of flights were actually cancelled in what appeared to be a move to maximise loadings and profits for another flight that ended up being 4 times the price of the original. What are you doing in relation to price gouging that some airlines appear to be undertaking?
Senator Cash.
Thank you, Senator Griffin. Certainly the government's expectation is that our nation's airlines, as we do with any business, they abide by the nation's consumer laws and they are treating their customers fairly. The airlines are contractually required to provide commercially competitive ticket pricing on subsidised flights. The government support seeks to maintain a level of competitive tension in the domestic aviation market, for example by supporting both Qantas and Virgin on the same route. Under the Domestic Aviation Network support, government assistance reduces in direct proportion to the revenue airlines earn on supported flights, and under the contracts, airlines provide weekly data in arrears at the time of invoicing to access commerciality triggers to enable the department to confirm if commerciality triggers actually apply.
Senator Griff, a final supplementary question.
Minister, a little bit of clarification on your last statement, but does the DANS underwriting agreement of flights continue to apply if an airline operates additional profitable services on a DANS-specific route? And will you table the DANS agreement with Virgin and Qantas?
Senator Cash.
Senator Griffin, my understanding is that in relation to the Domestic Aviation Network support contracts, the contracts with airlines are actually commercially confidential and as such are not for publication. And in relation to the second part of your question, I would need to take that on notice and provide you with that information.
Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Resources, Water and Northern Australia, Senator Ruston. Because I live in Central Queensland, I know how important mining jobs are to all of our communities and right throughout regional Queensland. Can the Minister update the Senate on the outlook for mining projects that will continue to employ thousands of regional Australians?
Minister representing the Minister for Resources, Water and Northern Australia, Senator Ruston. Order. Order. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you very much, Senator Canavan, for your question and understanding the huge importance that the resources sector plays in Australia, but particularly up your way in Rockhampton in that economy. And the government in which we are a member, the Morrison-McCormack government, understands how extraordinarily important that the resources sector is and the role that it plays in creating jobs and investment in Australia, but particularly in regional Australia. The sector is an absolute key pillar of our economic prosperity, and it will be absolutely crucial to ensure that Australia's economic recovery is strong. In fact, in August this year, the resources industry was employing over 247,000 Australians, and that's an increase of more than 6,000 since February. And we know the importance of giving regional Australia the best opportunity, and we will continue to back the resources sector as one of the largest and most important employers in Australia. And even in the midst of the once-in-a-century, the largest economic shock in 100 years, this sector continues to support our regional communities and provides great support and commitment to the training of new workers, with some 8,500 new workers have been recently trained. And the latest report on resources and energy major projects for 2020 identified a really bright future for many of our major resources and energy projects, including a 19% increase from last year in a number of major resources and energy projects under development currently in Australia. And these 335 projects have a value of $334 billion. And as the Prime Minister said, our focus right now is protecting Australia's health, securing jobs and livelihoods, and setting Australia up to make sure that we are stronger when the coronavirus is over.
Senator Canavan, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. President. Can the Minister please outline how the Liberal National Government is supporting regional resources communities to build new industries and create new jobs across regional and rural Australia, particularly across Northern Australia?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And whether it be gas, whether it be iron ore, whether it be critical minerals, our resources industries continue to invest in our economy, bringing jobs and long-term security to regional Australia and regional Australians. And the recent Resources and Energy Major Projects report identified the broad spread of opportunities that exist in the resources investment across Australia, including Queensland and the Northern Territory. And as you probably are aware, Senator Canavan, in Queensland alone there are more than 50 projects generating billions and billions of dollars for the Queensland and the Australian economy. As well as the projects in Major Canavan's home state, yesterday the Minister for Resources announced that we're helping fast-track a $1.5 billion project to mine phosphate in Senator McMahon's home state of the Northern Territory. This project, which is 200 kilometres from Tennant Creek, will operate for 25 years, creating 900 jobs in construction and 250
Senator Ruston.
jobs
Senator
ongoing.
Canavan, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can I ask, is the minister aware of any risks to the mining industry and the jobs that they provide in my home state of Queensland?
Order! Order on my right. You're not meant to make your own minister's time difficult to be heard. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, the one thing I can absolutely assure you, Senator Canavan, is this government, the government of which you and I are a member, remains absolutely committed to supporting the resources sector in this country. And that's why in the 2021 budget the Morrison-McCormack government invested $125 million to extend the Exploring for the Future program for another 4 years, and $52.9 million for the gas-fired recovery package. This investment is absolutely crucial for Australia's economy, especially now that our internal borders are starting to open up. These measures attract investment, they deliver jobs and they secure reliable, low-cost energy pipeline for manufacturers, industries and for households. And I know, Senator Canavan, you've been a very vocal supporter of the expansion of the new Acland mine in the Darling Downs, and it was really disappointing that we've been waiting several years for its approval by the Queensland government. Investing in mining is a great opportunity for this country.
Order. Senator Siewert.
Thank you, Mr President. Mr President, my question is to the Minister for Social Services, Family and Social Services, Senator Ruston. Minister, on the 1st of January 2021, the new rate of the coronavirus supplement will result in an extra 1.16 million people living below the poverty line. Is it government policy for people on the job seeker payment to live in poverty?
The Minister for Families and Social Services, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thanks Senator Siewert for her question. The one thing that the Morrison government, Morrison-McCormack government, is absolutely committed to is to making sure that we support all Australians by providing a safety net for those people who find themselves without work. But, Senator Siewert, we recognise that we have been through a once-in-a-100-year crisis, and the impact of that crisis has been severe across our entire economy. And that's why we put in place the coronavirus supplement and a raft of other measures to support Australians through this crisis. As part of that, we have made decisions on a regular basis about how much additional support that we need to continue to put into the economy to make sure that we support Australians through this really difficult time. We put in place the coronavirus supplement back in March, and we continue to have that supplement in place. It continues in place at the moment for the 3 months to the 31st of December, and then from the 1st of January it will remain in place at a rate of 150.
Order. Senator Siewert on a point of order.
Sorry, I kept my preamble really short, and I asked a pretty short question. So could I ask the minister, through you, President, to get to my question, which is it government policy for people on the job seeker payment to live in poverty?
You're quite right. You had a short preamble. I mean, I'm listening carefully to the minister's answer. She is directly addressing the issue of payment and supplement, at least to what I've heard. I've allowed you to restate the end of your question. I can't instruct her how to answer the question. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, Senator Siewert would know very clearly that the absolute priority and policy of this government is to make sure that we work with the Australian economy, with the Australian public, with all Australians to make sure that we have a strong economy that creates jobs, so those people who find themselves in a situation where they don't have employment, the jobs are created so they are able to get to work. Because we know, as you know, Senator Siewert, that people who are working have a higher standard of living than those that find themselves having to rely on welfare. But the most important thing that we can do is to support Australians through the appropriate policy settings that we have put in place through this once-in-a-century pandemic, to make sure that that ongoing support reflects a very clear balance between supporting Australians and recognising the shallow jobs market, but at the same time we need to make sure that we put the right incentives for Australians to re-engage with the workforce.
Ruston. Senator Siewert, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. 1.1 million children are living with parents who receive the coronavirus supplement. What do you say to these children who will miss out on a proper Christmas this year because there is no certainty about the job seeker payment?
Good question.
Senator Ruston.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President, and I'd once again thank Senator Siewert for her follow-up question. I obviously don't accept the premise of her question. I think that the government, of which I am a member, has worked very hard this year to make sure that we put additional supports in place for all Australians, and those supports remain in place today and they will remain in place after Christmas into the first 3 months of 2021, and we will continue to monitor the situation to make sure that we balance the supports that have been put in place to make sure that Australians are supported through this particular pandemic. And as Senator Siewert would be well aware, the government has always been committed to making sure that our welfare system is targeted so that we are providing the level of support that individuals to make sure that individuals get the support that they need to recognise their individual circumstances. So I reject the premise of your question that you first asked, Senator Siewert, and this government remains committed to supporting all Australians.
Senator Siewert, a final supplementary question.
The Productivity Commission recently found that mutual obligations and the income support system is exacerbating people's poor mental health. Do you agree that the low rate of income support and the punitive mutual obligations are making Australians' mental health worse? Wouldn't it provide certainty with a permanent ongoing increase of the job seeker payment being in place? Wouldn't that help the nation's mental health?
Yes.
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. The one thing that we are absolutely committed to is to make sure that Australians who want to work have the opportunity to be able to go to work, because, as you rightly point out, Senator Siewert, people who find themselves without work find themselves in a more difficult situation and have lower levels of personal well-being than those that are working. And that is why we are absolutely committed to make sure that we put job creation at the absolute top of our agenda, at the same time providing levels of support to support all Australians through this pandemic. The government released the final report in the Productivity Commission report to which you referred on the 16th of November, and we will very, very carefully consult with stakeholders in relation to the findings in that report. And we will deliver a very comprehensive whole-of-government mental health and suicide prevention response to that report in the coming months.
Senator Patrick.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Agriculture, Drought and Emergency Management, Senator Ruston. South Australia produces half of Australia's wine and 80% of our wine exports. Exports to China reach $1.2 billion annually. What is the government's estimate of the prospective losses to the Australian wine industry, and specifically to South Australia, as a result of China's punitive tariff decision and the effective exclusion of Australian wine from the Chinese market? How much damage will China's tariff do? What is the likely time frame for any Australian complaint about China's outrageous actions to the World Trade Organisation? And is it not the case that the WTO's dispute resolution process could take well over a year, likely much longer?
The Minister representing the Minister for Agriculture, Drought and Emergency Management, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you very much, Senator Patrick, for your question and also some heads-up time about the subject that you were intending to ask about. Well, obviously Australia is extraordinarily disappointed by the actions of China to seek to impose a provisional anti-dumping measure of between 107 and 212%. The Australian government is absolutely unaware of any evidence that Australian wine exporters have dumped their products in the Chinese market, and Australian exporters, we acknowledge, have worked very, very hard to establish themselves in that market. However, right now the most important priority of the government is to work with the Chinese Ministry of Commerce for the 10-day period which we are currently allowed to make submission in writing by the affected parties in response to this announcement. Senator, I also understand that as today, I'm not sure whether they have or they're about to meet, the Minister for Agriculture, along with Senator Birmingham, the Minister for Trade, will be meeting with the Chief Executive of the Australian Grape and Wine Association, Tony Battelaine, to discuss with them the implications of this particular action, should it be successful, on the Australian wine industry. There is no doubt, Senator Patrick, that the impact, should this action be successful and these provisional duties get brought into place, would be significant on our home state. As you would be aware, of the $1.07 billion worth of wine exported to China, over $800 million of that actually comes out of our home state in South Australia. So right now we will continue to work with the industry to assess the impact should this go ahead, but our first priority must be to make sure that it doesn't happen in the first place, and we have a very short time frame in which to make that happen, with the 10 days in which we have to make those written submissions.
Senator Patrick, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Given that China's Ministry of Commerce first announced that it was targeting wine imports in late August, 3 months ago, what plans for immediate assistance to our wine industry is the government now ready to implement? Will the government provide financial assistance such as loans to help family wine growers and makers survive in this abrupt, disruptive event? And indeed, what are you going to do in respect of other international markets?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you, Senator Patrick. Well, I wasn't in the meetings that the Trade Minister and the Agriculture Minister had with the wine industry today, or are having with the wine industry today, where I'm sure that they will be discussing a number of things by which the Australian government can support the Australian wine industry through these particularly difficult times. But one thing I can tell you is that the government has, over recent months and years, working, for instance, to open up other trade market opportunities. For instance, through the agricultural councillors that have been put in place in many of our highly profitable other trade markets. I believe we now have 22 trade councillors that are working through the ASEAN countries to make sure that we continue to successfully build markets and get favourable trading arrangements with these emerging markets. We also do things like the Export Market Development Grant Program. They're free seminars and trade advantage opportunities.
Senator Ruston, time for the answers expired. Senator Patrick, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. In light of China's punitive actions, will the government suspend the wine export charge, the wine research levy and the grape research levy, which industry pays to Wine Australia, which in recent years has spent time advocating for in the Chinese market? Will the government replace those industry levies with a substantial increase in direct budget funding this year and across the forward estimates for Wine Australia to ramp up its activities, especially to promote things outside of the Chinese market?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you, Senator Patrick. Well, obviously, I am not in a position to come in here and advise you of policy of which I am unaware. But one thing I can absolutely tell you, Senator Patrick, is the Australian government will continue to back our exporters. For instance, the government has a track record of standing up for our wine exporters. We took Canada to the World Trade Organisation, and Canada agreed back in July this year to remove its tax and sales restrictions discriminating against Australian wine, following Australia's initiation of a World Trade Organisation dispute. It is an example of where we have demonstrated our willingness to back our exporters and our wine exporters particularly, and we will make sure in this particular instance that we work through all options to make sure that we can push back against this anti-dumping claim made by China so that our exporters are not unfairly dealt with.
Senator Chisholm.
Thanks, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Emergency Management, Senator Ruston. The Royal Commission into the 2019-20 bushfire season recommended developing a national aerial firefighting capability, warning, and I quote, "The increasing duration of fire seasons in the northern and southern hemispheres and the increasing duration and severity of fire seasons in Australia will make it increasingly difficult to share aircraft domestically and to acquire aviation services when we need them." The Morrison government dismissed this recommendation, claiming that the government is comfortable with current arrangements. Why?
Minister representing the Minister for Agriculture, Drought and Emergency Management, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Chisholm for the question and inform him that there's no H in my name. Look, thank you very much. You raise a very, very important issue. Aerial firefighting plays an extraordinarily important role in protecting communities, essential infrastructure and providing the vital support that our bushfire fighters on the ground so importantly need. Also, the National Aerial Firefighting Centre is an effective method for the government to be able to deliver critical emergency management capacity. And I know that the commissioners and the chief fire officers within each jurisdiction work very closely with that centre to determine the type and location of aerial firefighting assets based on the assessed bushfire risk. This collaborative approach is absolutely essential right now as we enter into the bushfire season. We remain absolutely committed to supporting this important emergency management capability, and we know that our aerial firefighters are integral to the safety of our communities as they fight fires and deliver important resources when and where a disaster might strike. In fact, we announced a permanent increase in funding to the centre of $11 million a year, taking the annual contributions to in excess of $25 million. Additionally, the government supplements the operating costs of aircraft through the disaster recovery funding arrangements with the states and territories.
Oh, sorry, Senator Gallagher, a point of order.
Mr President, we've had more than half the time now. Relevance. The question was specifically about a recommendation from the Bushfire Royal Commission and why the government had dismissed it. If the minister wants to table the brief she's reading from, we're very happy to allow that to be tabled, because, but an answer to the question would be preferable.
I'm listening to the minister's answer. I've allowed you to restate that. I think when a question is asked why a particular action is taken or not taken, that is relatively open-ended, and as long as the minister is directly relevant to the subject matter, and I understand, at least if I correctly understand, she's talking about aerial firefighting capacity, I believe that is being directly relevant. Senator Ruston.
Look, thank you very much, Mr President. Well, the government has noted recommendation 8.3 of the Bushfire Royal Commission final report and concerning the Commonwealth, state and territory governments adopting procurement and contracting strategies to develop a broader sovereign aerial firefighting capability. The government has clearly stated it has no intention of taking over the role of the states and territories, but it will work closely with them to ensure that we support aerial firefighting to keep Australia safe.
Senator Ruston. Senator Chisholm, a supplementary question.
Thanks, Mr President. The Royal Commission's report noted there were inconsistencies during the last bushfire season, and I quote, "The requests for aerial firefighting assistance were not fulfilled because there were no aircraft available." Why did the Morrison government fail to ensure requests for aerial firefighting assistance were fulfilled?
No plan.
Senator Ruston.
Well, thank you very
Order.
much, Mr President, and thanks Senator Chisholm for his follow-up question. I think to a large extent I have answered your question in the first part of my question, and that is that the Australian government is absolutely committed to making sure that we have a sovereign aerial firefighting capability that is appropriate for the conditions that we find. Now, we have a very comprehensive response to bushfires. We continue to work across jurisdictions, and including acknowledging Senator Reynolds and the huge role that the military played in supporting Australians and our firefighters during the terrible bushfires at the end of 2019 and into 2020. We remain absolutely committed to doing that. We also remain committed to making sure that there is a broad range of support put in place, whether it be making sure that we support telecommunications, whether we make sure that we've got wildfire things in place. But in terms of our aerial firefighting capability, we are absolutely committed to providing and working with the states to
Senator
include
Ruston.
this.
Senator Chisholm, a final supplementary question.
Thanks, Mr President. Why is the Morrison government refusing to deliver the aerial firefighting capabilities required to keep Australians safe?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Senator, through you, Mr President. Thank you very much, Senator Chisholm, for your question. Well, I would refute the context of the question that you have just put forward, because I don't believe that the Australian government is doing what you've accused it of doing. I believe the Australian government is absolutely supporting the Australian public in making sure that we put in the capabilities to make sure that we keep Australians safe. We put those things in place last year through some of the most devastating bushfires this country has ever seen, and we remain committed to working with the states and territories.
Senator Wong, on a point of order.
The point of order, direct relevance, was a very, very specific question about the delivery of aerial firefighting capability, and I'd ask the minister to return to the question.
You've reminded the minister of the question. I will continue to listen closely. The question did ask why and then asserted a claim about the government. As long as the minister is directly addressing the claim and the subject matter within it directly, I think she's being relevant. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, to the point of Senator Wong, I refuted the accusation that was made and the premise of the question that was asked in the first place, because I believe that the Australian government is supporting our aerial firefighting capacity through 159 aircraft, providing 185 services. And if you'd like me to do, I can list or put on the record all of those capabilities.
Order. Order. Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds. Can the minister update the Senate on the steps the government is taking to protect Australians against cybercrime?
The Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Patterson for that question, and I also thank him for his enduring support for our nation's security. Malicious cyber activity is increasing in our nation in its frequency, in its scale and also in its sophistication. In the last financial year alone, the Australian Cyber Security Centre had over 60,000 reported cases of cybercrime. Today, there's over 2 million small to medium businesses here in Australia. Their cyber resilience is absolutely critical to our post-COVID-19 recovery. And that's why today I launched a new national cyber security campaign for small businesses. This new campaign will empower Australians to take responsibility for their online security. Led by the Australian Cyber Security Centre, it will provide regular, easy-to-follow advice for all Australians on how to protect themselves. The campaign will particularly target the major cybersecurity threats that face Australian businesses, and that starts with the first publications on ransomware. This campaign will be as agile as the cyber criminals that we seek to defeat. This government has made an unprecedented investment in our nation's cyber security. This includes a $1.67 billion announcement by the Prime Minister through the National Cyber Security Strategy. It also includes a $15 billion investment in enhanced cyber and information warfare capabilities for the Australian Defence Force and the Australian Signals Directorate. But cybersecurity is a shared responsibility for all Australians, and I urge all Australians to go to cyber.gov.au for tips on how to act now, how to stay secure and how to protect themselves and their families online.
Senator Patterson, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Minister. Can you advise the Senate of how the government is supporting Australian small business owners against ransomware attacks?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I also thank the senator for his question. Australians need to be aware that it is not just large businesses that are being targeted by cyber criminals. Small and medium enterprises are also being targeted. Ransomware attacks now pose the highest cyber security threat to Australian small businesses. Over the last 12 months, the Australian Cyber Security Centre has seen a 50% increase in ransomware attacks. This week, the government, through the Australian Cyber Security Centre, has launched 2 new guides on ransomware. These guides provide very practical and easily implementable advice for Australian businesses. They advise how to protect themselves, how to respond if they are subject to a ransomware attack, and also how to recover from these attacks. I urge all Australian businesses to visit cyber.gov.au to download these guides.
Senator Patterson, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister provide an update on how the government is using its offensive cyber capability to protect Australians from cybercrime during COVID-19?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and again thank you very much, Senator, for that question. Globally, malicious cyber actors are taking advantage, quite shamelessly and cruelly, of the COVID-19 pandemic. This government has continued to strike back against highly organised and highly sophisticated foreign cyber criminals. We've done this through an offensive operation led by the Australian Signals Directorate. The Australian Signals Directorate has collaborated with the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission and also the Australian Federal Police, using its offensive cyber capabilities to attack cyber criminals' tools and to disrupt their business models. These criminals are simply ruthless, and they are attacking Australian and targeting Australians by tricking victims into downloading advanced criminal malware onto their mobile devices. This ASD-led operation has protected hundreds, if not thousands, of Australians
Senator Reynolds,
from
time for the answer
crimes.
has expired. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Ruston. Yesterday, the Minister failed to tell the Senate the exact date on which the government first became aware that robo-debt was not valid. On what date did the government first become aware that Mr Morrison's robo-debt scheme was not valid?
Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank Senator Wong for her question. I had the opportunity since yesterday to consider the question that was asked of me by Senator Gallagher, and I reject the premise of the question, because at no time has there been a finding that the income compliance program was not valid.
Order.
Okay.
They're your words.
No,
Order.
they're not.
Order.
They
Order. Senator Wong,
Senator
you've got
Wong,
the
you are
opportunity.
wrong.
Senator Ruston, Senator Wong, you've got an opportunity to ask a supplementary question. I believe the minister has concluded her answer. Senator Wong.
A supplementary question. Yesterday, the minister used those precise words, "not valid." So I again ask, when— oh, sorry, you're right, it was on Monday. on Monday, you used precisely those words. I again ask the minister, on which date did the government first become aware that the scheme was not valid? I also asked the minister how long it took between that knowledge and the ceasing of issuing of debt.
Time for the question has expired. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And for the point, to make sure that we are very, very clear, on Monday I rose in this place and I was referring to income averaging as the method by which the method of debt collection. I have never said that, and I was verbaled by Senator Gallagher yesterday, that the income compliance program was not valid. They are very, very different things, Senator Wong. So I will stand by my comments, and I think that if those opposite decided to review what has actually been said in this place, they would see that I did not say what I was verbaled and suggested that I said by Senator Gallagher. So on that basis, Senator, there has never been any finding
Order, Senator
that
O'Neill.
the income compliance program was not valid.
Senator Wong, final supplementary question.
To settle.
The minister has made. My supplementary question is this: the minister has maintained that the government acted, and I quote, very quickly, and acted, quote, immediately. Given, oh well, I'm quoting her. That's not verballing. I'll take that interjection. Given it has taken 76 AAT decisions over 2 years, hundreds of secret rejected AAT appeals, and the suffering of thousands of Australians, how can the minister stand by her statement that the government acted immediately?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Well, Senator Wong, I will stand by my comments that the government acted quickly, and I will reiterate the fact that when, upon finding and being made aware that income averaging was not a valid means by which to generate a debt, the government acted almost straight away to make sure that we ceased that program and subsequently put in place a program to ensure that those people who had debts,
Please resume your seat, Senator Ruston. Senator O'Neill, when I call you to order 5 times consecutively, you shouldn't keep counting. Senator Ruston, please continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So what I will tell this place is on the 19th of November 2019, the government announced that going forward it would seek additional proof points when raising a debt. On the 29th of May this year, the government announced it would refund and zero approximately 470,000 debts raised using income averaging. As of the 30th of November, nearly all of those people have had their refunds completed.
Order. Senator Birmingham.
Ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.